There's one thing I can mention, I guess, which is we've changed a bunch of names of Makefile targets recently. So the development process has slightly changed. We combined a bunch of the start dev ones, and now it's essentially just 3 targets that do everything. It's run Clojure, run Metro, and run Android or run iOS, and that's all you need for development. And that's documented in the starting guide in the root of the repo. So that's I guess, noticeable change for all developers. Well, yes, the documentation has been updated both on the site, on the status.im site, and in the repo. So it should be clearer. You just have to look at the starting guide, for example. That's it.
Okay. Well, hey everyone. I don't think there's so much to introduce about myself here, but so I'm doing this for the first time. So let's see how that goes. I'm just gonna follow the agenda that we have, and obviously this is, I guess, also a little bit of an open discussion to the extent that everyone can, throw in ideas and leave their opinions and thoughts. And with that in mind, I would say we just go ahead with the review of the previous actions. Those are the ones that have been collected in the previous dev call notes, which I'm going to link now here in the chat as well. So that's from the dev call notes 29. If you scroll the way down to the bottom of the document, there's not too much going on in terms of action items. I think at least things that are relevant to this particular call, but there seem to be some action items, things like process around pinning new stickers and some comments on some PRs. These are still unchecked. Is there still anything that needs action at this point, or something that needs to be discussed around that? Anybody wants to chime in here, please feel free to do so. That could be. I mean, I'm not entirely sure. I haven't read all of the transcript from the last meeting, but they seem to be related to that. Yes. So there's one. I think Andre is not around, so we can leave that one out. Is there anything about the process of pinning new stickers that have been discussed last time? Probably not. Okay, if there's no thoughts from anyone, that's fine. We can just continue to the next one, I guess, which is the specs review. So for the specs, as Hester mentioned, we have a bit more structure with that now that Oscar, I guess, came up with. And we have for that we have the repository with a bunch of open issues and open pull requests. So I guess one thing that makes sense now would be maybe to go over the open pull requests first, because there's some of them are pending for quite a while. So I know that there was some discussions and some of these pull requests that still need some action to get those merged, or maybe there's still some open questions. So maybe we can start with those and talk about what's left to do to get these specs, I guess, finalized. So maybe we start with the add spec for IPFS gateway for sticker pack, which was open 17 days ago. I'm going to link that one in the chat now here. Are there any questions or things that are open that still need to be done about that one?
Yeah, the PR is ready. There was only one request change, and I was waiting for the approval from the second reviewer.
So maybe that's just me, but it seems your audio is very, very low. Can you try again and maybe, I don't know, speak closer to the microphone or something?
Yeah, the PR is ready, and I'm waiting for one more approval because there is one request changes in the PR.
Okay, so this pull request is kind of like ready for merge and just needs another approval. I'm not sure who would be responsible for that. So anyone knows? So that's PR one.
I think yes, it's a great idea that two people approve it. I think it would be useful if someone from the core team just did a sanity check of it, and then we can merge it.
Okay, cool.
We have a bunch of people from the core that have commented, but just a green sticker, green approval, and yeah, if everything looks good to you. And also, if anyone else who is also familiar with the problem domain, feel free to review it. So, for example, I know like a lot of Embark people are getting more like Pascal and all the others. Like, if you guys want to review, feel free to go ahead. If you don't have permissions, just ping me and I'll add you.
Okay, cool. All right, then let's just. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
The question about this is, I'm outside of it, so I'm just asking for clarification. If indexing data submitted that's on IPFS is something that's outside the scope of that PR, indexing for the purpose of just quickly, quick loading in dApps, because sometimes actually resolving content on IPFS could take a little bit of time. I'm just wondering if that's within or without.
Are you referring to pinning or something else?
No, I'm referring to actually indexing for the purposes of quickly resolving data. For example, like something like the graph would allow you to, it basically indexes IPFS data so that you can quickly look it up rather than having to traverse the network to find the content and load it, which could take, sometimes it could take some time for that data to appear. So indexing could speed that up. But I'm just wondering if that is something that's outside the scope of this PR.
So I guess the first question is, does that exist right now in the current app, or is that a proposed enhancement?
I don't think it does.
If it exists, I think it would be fine to have it in that PR. If it's a proposed enhancement, I would suggest having a separate spec for it, and it could be a capability that clients use.
Yeah, that's sensible.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions on the PR for the IPFS stuff? Okay, no more questions. Then we move on to the next one, which is the keycard hard wallet usage spec PR. Just link that one here in the chat as well. That's 109. This one still has a bunch of comments that didn't seem to be addressed yet. What's the status of that one? Well, it definitely seems like there's some things that need to be changed in the spec. So, but okay, then we can move over to the next one, which would be 108. That is the depth browser API usage spec from I guess that's Vitaly. Link this one here in the chat as well. This one seems to have had some iterations already, so that's good. Are there any open questions or thoughts or things that need to be done on this particular spec? Okay, no- So this particular spec, it has some. I mean, there's a bunch of comments there that have been addressed, like most of them, I guess. Looks like it at least. And I think there's only there. I see there's one to-do left here from Oscar. I don't know. Maybe seems to be like just a little change log stuff. Probably not super. Not sure, but it seems complete. I'm not sure if anybody has any questions on this one, or if there's anything left to do to finalize the spec. Then this is a good moment to shout. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next one.
One quick thing. Actually, this is the first time I'm looking at this PR, but another scope question is, and there's been discussions in the past of allowing dApps to access some of the chat API. For example, allowing a dApp to try to send a message in a chat room, or other chat functionality. Is that something that's planning to be addressed here, or is that also something out of scope and that is something separate? Well, it's not being used because it doesn't exist right now, but I know there's been talk of allowing, there's been demand for it, for example, allowing dApps that would like to be able to, on behalf of a user, send a message into a chat room or to another user. Right now, that functionality doesn't exist. So is this just a matter of creating a spec to document existing functionality, or is this, sort of the ideal spec that we'd like to have all encompassing?
I think here we are only describing what's the current state of the app, I believe. There are no proposals.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of the outside the PRs open right now are about documenting the current state of things. I don't think any of the existing ones are about future proposals. They're all things that already exist.
Which means what Barry suggested would be a good proposal for another spec, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if this has been discussed within core or if it's prioritized or if it's yeah.
I mean, I guess is there a separate spec or plan to have a separate spec specifically for the API that dApps could access? Because it seems like this might be this might be that spec, Tap Browser API. And I guess if we want to add this functionality in the future, we'll just have a proposed update to the spec.
Yeah, exactly. So one way of moving that forward would be to have a corresponding, like creating an issue with the sort of problem description and so on, and then take it up. And then I guess depends on who would develop that, and then it would be a new PR, and then we can discuss it from there in terms of where it would be implemented first and so on.
Okay.
I mean, it can like the feature request could come from somewhere else, like from Status React, for example, but it might be a good idea to have a corresponding issue in the spec. That's sort of the PR targets. Obviously, if it's just a small change, then it doesn't have to be a whole issue and so on, but it's like something completely new.
Is anything else missing on that particular spec PR to get this merged? Okay, then maybe this can land soon. There's no more thoughts on that one. Then we move on to the next one, which is the spec about adding mentions. That is pull request number 105. Any open questions on that one, or any action items that still need to be done?
Actually, mentions is not on my roadmap. I've got transaction pending transactions and SNT and emoji reactions to messages, but mentions is not on my roadmap. It's okay. It's completely fine. Oh, right. Okay.
I think Eric.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm currently doing the auto-completion, and I will finish the spec afterward. And that would be the first version. And then we need to add, once status go is serving notifications, probably we can complete mentions with that. So right now, I think I will leave it open until I'm done with auto-completion, and I will change the part about things left to do. So I would leave it as a draft for now.
Yeah, we can. We can definitely merge as a draft. Yeah, and then have Justin create an issue with follow-up things that have to be addressed after, and then whoever is working on it can pick it up.
Okay, then I will clean up the copyright and stuff today.
Sweet. Any other thoughts on that one? Okay, then we have.
Sorry, can you just clarify? Like, so the current spec, Eric, that is explaining what is live already. Is that correct, or is this something that's new?
That's correct. Currently, status go returns in the message. There is a tag when it's a mention, and that's pretty much it. So the client just has to read it.
Gotcha.
Okay, I guess the next one is also on Eric, which is notifications. Sending the link here, PR 104. That one had a lot of comments from Oscar as well. I think those need some update too. And it's
Yeah,
an update 4 days ago. So
yeah, I need to review it, but because basically I was giving too much information about the specifics of what Status is doing in the Android client. So I will clean up. And same, it will be a draft because we need to discuss the handling of notifications by Status Go. So right now there is the Android client is reading the signals from Status Go, and we want to change that so that Status Go sends specific message signals for notifications instead of reading the generic message signals. It will be simpler for clients to implement notifications, and it will be more stable because right now it's reading the same messages that Status React is reading to show messages in the app, and interpreting them to build notifications. So the idea is to have specific notification signals from Status Go, and that would mean that we can have user settings for what should be notified and so on, and the clients that implements notification would then only have to listen to these notification signals and know that it has to be displayed in any case.
okay, so if there are no more thoughts on that or any additions, then we can move on to the next point in our agenda, which is well, these were just the open PRs. There's still a bunch of issues in the specs repository. At this point, it's 18, and a lot of them are, or plenty of them are quite old as well. So it seems like there's specifically 2 of them which need more discussion at this point. It's the change from 8 EIPS to 8 supported, and the removal of personal pronouns from specs. Just start with the issue 116. I'm going to link it here as well. It's also linked in the agenda. Are there any questions, open questions, or things that need to be addressed in this call for this particular issue?
Maybe I can give a little bit of background about this particular issue. I'm the author of it. So the main questions that I've got basically stem from the draft PR that I've got open at the moment, which is integrating WACU specifications into the status specs. And basically, what I've noticed is that there's a lot of EIPs and BIPs referenced, obviously, in the 8 EIP document. But with the advent of WACU, we have specifications that effectively are analogous to certain EIPs with regards to Whisper, but I didn't know if they would have a home in the EIP document, and if they did, then should that document be renamed, because it wouldn't then be strictly EIPs. I mean, even at the moment, it's not strictly EIPs because it includes BIPs as well. So the main question is, do we want to include? And so I had a brief conversation with Oscar about that, and basically, well, I don't want to speak for Oscar, but I think we basically agreed that it's not it wouldn't be a bad place for these references to go to. It's not really a major issue though.
Yeah, like it's a bit of an interesting one because the origin of that spec or that file is that we knew that we had a bunch of EAPs and BAPs and so on that were supported and were used, and it would be useful to have like a single reference for that, because to some extent they should all be in line in the other various specs. So it's not clear to me to what extent it's like a double thing and the use of that for other client implementers and so on. But like I'm fine with us renaming it. I don't know, I would be curious to hear what other people's thoughts are on that existing spec and how useful it is and how much doubles or specified it is and so on.
Yeah, I would also be very curious as to know what other members of the team think about doing that. I think in my mind, the document actually serves very well as a references page, as you would normally find in an academic document. So to me, if it's the fact that it's referenced twice, the fact that it's in a compilation, to me is useful. But I definitely, yeah, at the moment it's marked as discussion, so we're open to anybody's opinion at this stage. I don't have anything else to say on this particular point.
Does anyone else want to add something to that? Okay.
Sorry, maybe it's a
Well,
question to people coming from the Embark team. How useful is that spec to you? Like if you're thinking about implementing a client and so on, like how is that something you would use as a reference, and what would make it maximally useful for you?
You mean like this particular spec or spec in general?
Right now, this particular spec.
And the only other thing that I would mention at this point is that if you can't think of anything right now, the issue is open, so you're more than welcome to drop a comment in there with whatever feedback you've got. If you don't want to give it right now, that's fine.
Yeah, I have to get back to you on that, but in general, the specs for sure they help. Like the specs that are right now in specs.stress.im, I think those are very well done and well written. And generally, if there's specs, it's better than reverse engineering code and things like that. So I think for sure it's helpful. I have to get back on you on this specific spec though.
Correct, yes.
Okay, so next up we have one about the removal of personal pronouns from the specs. I think, as far as I can see here, I'm sorry, let me just link the issue to that one. It's 115. The last comment there also was by Oscar, and he said that those changes could just be made as per request. So I'm not sure if there's anything that needs to be discussed here, other than, yeah, feel free to propose changes.
I don't even know if this is supposed to be in this repository.
Say that again, sorry.
I don't even know if this issue is supposed to be in this repository.
I think it. Well, are you referring to the VAC repo?
Yeah, I feel like it's supposed to be in VAC. Yes.
Okay. Well, I think you're right that it's an issue that also relates to VAC, but the examples in this particular issue are directly from the status specs. But I think you are right that in VAC it's the same issue is present. So I don't know if it's a matter of just replicating the issue also in VAC. I'd have to double check though, just to make sure that there is a heavy usage of personal pronouns in the specs there as well. But just a point of clarification, there are definitely heavy usages of personal pronouns in the specifications in status IM specs.
Okay.
Yeah, so in the actual document, I've referenced it's actually for university students writing academic documents. It's just in the references section on the issue, but it gives quite a neat, consistent sort of method of phrasing sort of technical documents or academic documents. So it seems like, so on the proposal, I had a number of items, one of which was decide if the specification should have a consistent tone and mode of language. So at the moment, the consensus from Dean and Oscar is yes, it should, and the tone and mode of language should probably be formal. And then which also actually answers at the moment, unless there's any dissenting opinion, item number 2, which is the consistent tone is required. What should that tone be? Which again is formal language. And then the next one is just to implement that change, which would be the final item on that. So also, so if you're mentioning if this question is about going forwards, then it could be that we could implement this into our own documentation about how to write specs. Although Oscar would probably be able to speak a lot better to that because he's the author of an awful lot of guiding documentation.
Yes, so we have in some places we have like style guides in terms of language. So I would probably just add it to README there. If this turns into like a big recommendation doc, then maybe we can pull that out into separate Markdown or something. But for now, we'll just add it to README.
Okay, that's perfectly acceptable. Yeah. Yes, but at the moment, anybody that was looking at this particular issue, there's this reference that sort of is a helpful guide. So if it's not me that's doing this and it's somebody else, just to give an idea, it's at the bottom. Okay, I don't have anything else to say.
Okay, then we can move on to the next one, which is seems to be a bigger topic: sending or changes that need to be made to send images. There was no particular issue linked in the original agenda, but I just browsed through the list of issues and I found one which has a massive history of comments. Let me just link it here. It's issue 69. What's the status with that one? Obviously, I didn't read through all comments because the issue is from December 2019, but anybody want to chime in on that one?
I can do. Yeah, so basically, we kind of agreed on the protocol specs changes that needs to be made to send in images. They're fairly simple. So, I mean, like you just send in a MIME type, which is type of image, and then you send the payload of the image. That's kind of the easy part. We're going to send messages through Whisper, Waku, sorry, and so that's the easy part. So as we implemented this, what we discovered is that the current proof of work that we're using for our nodes is set way too high for us to send images of even reasonable size. So even from my desktop machine, sending a 200 kilobytes image was unfeasible. Like it would take 25 seconds, let alone on obviously a mobile device. It's never going to work. And so the only way for us to make it work is to dramatically reduce the proof of work of our nodes. So that has some, the main drawback of that is that, it's easier for people to basically, we just literally make it easier for people to send messages. And so what we've done a bit of investigation of what the impact is. And so what turns out sending small messages, like many small chat messages, and when I say small, I mean in size. So 500 characters, which is already probably a chunky message, it's a small message because that's 500 bytes in RAF. And so it's the same. It doesn't make a huge difference. So basically, the driving time is actually processing the message rather than calculating the proof of work. So there's no huge difference. Sending bigger messages makes a difference. So like obviously, like now it's possible to send 200 kilobytes messages and so on and so forth. And so the concern is spam. So given what's happening, there's no difference for a user to spam a chat with many messages that stands, which is probably like what is most disruptive to most users. But if they want to consume more of our bandwidth, like if we lower the proof of work, is easier. So there are in place some already. I checked. There are in place some rate limiting, and I believe that they are enabled. I checked the config. Jakob can actually double check that for me if he wants. But I think we already limit and we limit by message. We don't limit by size of the message, but it should be okay. And so it's whether we want to go ahead. A PR to the specs needs to be made with the lower proof of work. That's basically the issue. It's not very much about the format of the image because that's very simple. You have some benefits, obviously, which is it's less CPU intensive to send messages, but that has some drawbacks. That if someone wants to spam the cluster, we make it easier for them. As I said, when spamming the cluster, we need to differentiate between sending a lot of chat messages and sending a lot of messages in terms of size, in terms of so consuming our bandwidth. Those are two distinct things, and sending more chat messages is not really impacted by these, while consuming more of our users' bandwidth is.
So I have two questions. So the first is on rate limiting. If I recall correctly, the rate limiting allows for rate limiting on multiple dimensions. So is it the case that the current policy in place is just on the number of messages, but that it could be changed to also take into account the size of messages?
I believe at the moment it's not implemented, but you could potentially keep a tally of how many, what's the size of the message that you received. So far, the rate limit is on IP, by the way, and IP address and the PRID.
Gotcha. And the second question is, what's the timeline that we imagine for having image support?
It's already. I think Andre is polishing up the UI in terms of like my piece of work. So updating the cluster is not live, obviously. That needs to be done, but the code has been already written, so it's all done. So it's just like, it's ready. We're going to
soon.
Mm-hmm. It is potentially yes, and it is only for one-to-one at the beginning and private group chats. We're not going to go live with public.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments on that one?
The only minor question I've got is that this is a change in implementation for the proof of work required for sending messages. So I know from the code itself, it's anything that's over 5,000 bytes. 50,000 bytes. Is this something that should be mirrored in the specifications as well?
I think so. Yeah, like we need to. I think it should be updated. Yeah. So that's something I forgot to mention. That's a good point. So because we can't just lower proof of work for every single message. The reason being is that all the clients will just discard those messages. So what we do is, if a message is higher, if the size of a message is higher than X amount of bytes, we use a value that we know that like normal messages are not higher than their value generally. It will use the lower the proof of work. So newer clients will receive the message, older clients will not receive the message, which is expected. So older clients will not support images, obviously. So that change needs to be reflected in the specs, similarly to the fact whether we're going to change or not the proof of work.
Okay, thank you. So in my draft that I've currently got, I've actually added that line. So I don't know if I should take it out and maybe create a separate PR for that particular thing. But to be honest, I think that's probably the conversation for outside of this call.
Yeah, we can take it offline. I don't have strong opinions on the matter. For me, it's all the same.
Okay.
Sweet. All right. And then for the last, second last thing to discuss for today, unless there's any other topics you want to talk about, are there any proposals, like future spec proposals or ideas that anybody wants to discuss or throw into the room here? We've got one point here in the agenda, which is about notifications on iOS, as this seems to be a bit more challenging than on Android. Is there any thoughts on this one from anybody?
So I may not be.
So just as a,
Go ahead.
No, go on.
So I may not be completely up to date, but I did participate in a short discussion a few weeks ago about this, and one of the things that concerned me a little bit was, not only would notifications be opt-in on iOS, but effectively the other party, if you were chatting with someone, say on Android, would also, or maybe even if it's another iOS user, would also have to basically agree to that, right? So it would be on it was going to be on a case-by-case basis, I think. And the reason that concerned me is it seemed it would allow, it could be a potential vector for profiling. You could potentially differentiate Android from iOS users, and if someone was trying to figure out who someone was, it's a natural starting point. So again, maybe that's not relevant anymore, or maybe I misunderstood, but yeah,
it's relevant, but it's not even the only issue. The other issue is that the UX would be pretty bad, because users would wonder why they don't get notification for one chat and then for the others. So yeah, you would only get your notification in the chat where the other user agreed to send notifications, and you both agreed and exchanged means to notify each other. But that's the case where devices would send themselves. But if we delegate that to a centralized server, then it reduces a bit this issue. So yeah, it depends on what solution we decide to go with. One would be that you send a message through with Whisper, and the notification server would figure out. I mean, I don't have the details in mind, but there is the issue with having both parties having to agree on sending a notification. That was in the case where we were exchanging API keys for notifications. What we were doing initially, that was the first solution we had. But there was a V2 in the works where there would be an intermediate server that would be used, and the sender would use Whisper to communicate with that server, so that it wouldn't need, for instance, Android wouldn't need to have these libraries to communicate directly with Firebase, for instance.
Yeah, so just another thing I would like to add is the fact that before, like when we're talking about re-implementing what we had before users were directly exchanging notification tokens. So basically through contact requests. So as a user, I would send to Esther my token, and she would use it when she wanted to notify me, which is very unconventional because the token is meant to be a secret. And so, essentially the model that we were using, we were saying, okay, I trust that user, I send him the token, and so on and so forth. But you don't send one token per user. So you always send the same token to other users. So you ended up basically sending a lot of these tokens around. The other alternative, which is obviously maybe not desirable from a central decentralization point of view, is to have a central server, as Eric mentioned. And so in this model, we wouldn't trust this server. So you're going to have some trust in this server to keep your token. Essentially, you probably will have access to your token, and he will eventually ping the notification service, and so on and so forth. So that effectively, I think when we're talking about centralized notifications, we will maybe build it on top of WAC or Whisper, but it's probably easier to think about it as standard notifications, such as signals or other services. So probably we can get something very similar to that, no difference. Yeah, so basically, you're gonna save your token on this trusted server. Then we can think about who's controlling that server, but we know that it's going to be status at the beginning because no one else is using really their own. So when they want to send a message to you, and the email server will notify the App Store using your token.
Question out of curiosity, what's the difference in retention rates for Android with notifications and iOS? Yeah, essentially.
But are notification already out on Android?
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, right. So we cool. And the second question is, I know this was investigated. Like when I was looking into this a few years ago, it was not possible. I know Andre was looking into it last year. In terms of waking up from background from iOS or doing something like that, like that's essentially impossible due to sort of how Apple devices work. Is that still definitely the case, or is there some avenue for hope there?
It depends on how much you're hoping for, but there is a chance that you can wake the app on background notifications, but they need to be spaced in time. So I think it's like a couple or 3 times per hour max. So that would be one area to explore. For instance, in case we want the notification servers to work without any knowledge of your keys. So one way it could work is that when you use Waku, it would check the topics, and if there is a message in one topic that you're asking for, it would send a background notification. So it's not necessarily that you have a message there, but that there is messages to read for that topic. So if there is not too much topic collision, then there is chances that when you wake up the app, there will be stuff to read. Or so, yeah, there is things we could do in that area if we want to make a completely notification system that doesn't rely on the sender to also notify the notification server.
I did some reading on this last week, and you can do the background app refresh on iOS, but I think the main problem was that it's non-deterministic, and so the operating system randomly starts the process whenever, and you don't really know when or how frequently.
Yeah, this one is even less reliable. So that's what Andre tested last year, and the heuristics are completely unknown. But it seems like it's actually very rare that your app is being run, especially if it's doing a lot of stuff like we do with some network I/O and so on. It's more likely to work for apps that basically just do a quick HTTP request and shut down if there is nothing to do.
Any other comments on that or questions? We have a few minutes left for this call. Okay, so then we have there's now a chance for basically any other businesses that you want to talk about. So if there's any additional thoughts or things, yeah, please shout now. The Discuss Pro that you mentioned is the one that's called Desktop Pass Forward from Cori, or okay. Otherwise, I just found this one from Cori. Just added that. All right. Well, then I think that's it for the call for today. Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks for thanks Jessica for taking the notes. We will share them afterwards, I think, when we polish them a little bit and at the recording and everything. Yeah. Yeah, I guess we talk in 2 weeks. And
Yeah, thank you, Hester and Pascal, both of you. Awesome work.
Thanks, guys.
all right, friends. Take care.
Thank you.